I've had a song stuck in my head lately. Okay, not quite a whole song, mostly just the introduction to a song. The track, like this service, is called You Have to Ride the Wave, and it comes from one of Queens-based Punjabi American rapper Heems's simultaneously released first solo albums. These albums were released after the dissolution of the group Das Races, which had found popularity with catchy, silly songs like Combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, leaving the actually quite political members, Heems and Kool-A.D, feeling pretty unheard. You Have to Ride the Wave comes off of the more explicitly political of these two albums, Nehru Jackets, which includes, among other things, a track called NYC Cops, in which Heems recounts famous and more obscure instances of police brutality in New York City. I have to say, You Have to Ride the Wave is not and has never been my favorite track on that album. It is sonically dissonant and, with two featured artists, lacks the sort of clarity I enjoy most in the rest of that album. But the intro? That intro has been hard for me to get away from lately. In a distorted, lo-fi sounding voice over a slow but building electronic beat comes the voice of Arundhati Roy, the Indian author, essayist, and activist best known for her book, The God of Small Things. She says, "And we grew up outside the realm of all protections that society chose to offer its members. And so at a very young age, one was aware of the fact that you were not going to be given those protections, and you had to constantly try to understand what was going on and how to survive in this space, how not to go under. You're on your own, and then politics is in your life. You have to ride the wave." The snippet is from a 2002 conversation between Arundhati Roy and Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn asks a question about how Arundhati Roy became political, and in responding, she makes it clear that actually politics entered her life at a really early age. Roy is the child of a woman who made some unorthodox choices in a rather orthodox world. And so from, she says, 3 or 5 years old, she knew that politics was entering her life. Politics enters all of our lives at a variety of moments. Maybe for you, it first happened when you were 3 or 5, 25 or 50, but whenever politics first arrived in your life, it is certainly here now. There is right now no escaping the press of the political on our lives when, as hospital workers continue to fall ill from lack of appropriate protective equipment and bodies pile up everywhere from the morgue trucks now common in New York City to small community hospitals around the country, there remain calls from elected officials and AstroTurf protesters to open up, liberate even, states under safer at home orders. The world is broken open. The quiet parts, the genocidal undertones of years of right-wing capitalist policy are being said louder and louder each day. Politics is in our lives, and many of us, especially those already occupying marginalized and vulnerable positions in our society, will not be offered much in the way of protection. We have to learn to ride the wave. In a recent article on Vox, Writer, historian, and activist Rebecca Solnit wrote, "Disasters shake us up. You're suddenly aware of ephemerality and interdependence, the fleetingness of all things and the connection of all things. It's interesting how a disaster does what activists are always trying to do, point out the contradictions. How does the medical system actually function? Who does it leave behind? How does the economy function? Who does it leave behind? In the aftermath of something like this, the answers are so clear. Who benefits from the status quo is clear. And so you'll always have the winners of the old system pushing hard to reassemble it after it is shattered in front of our eyes. But the status quo is dead. The rest of us are saying, let's go forward, let's not go back, let's go another way. And here, in going another way, in learning to ride the wave together, is where the political entering into our lives becomes, for me, something that requires a spiritual response. There are two concepts that live pretty close together in my mind. First is a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that you could find in any of our great hymnals. A person will worship something, have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will come out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and our character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we are worshiping. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming. The second of these things that lives near together in my head is the concept of the effervescence of God as explained in the Mimamsa tradition of Hindu philosophical thought. From the Mimamsa perspective, as I studied it with Dr. Purushamada Villamora during our mutual time at the Graduate Theological Union. From this perspective, one of the main purposes of ritual is to pull God or gods or aspects of God into the world. You chant, you do a ritual, you pray, or take any other repetitive action as a means of allowing God to bubble up in the world. This concept stuck out to and sticks with me both because of its conceptual beauty, pulling God into the world, allowing the divine to bubble up, to effervesce like a sparkling drink on a warm day is beautiful as metaphors go. And because it leaves us with some responsibility. God, the divine, the universe, nature, however we're going to call it, has a lot of different aspects and can do or inspire us to do a wide variety of things. We're responsible for which things we do. We're responsible for which things we are worshiping, which parts of God we are pulling into existence, which things we are becoming. Learning to ride the wave together, figuring out how to direct ourselves so that the crashing of politics into our lives does not simply drown us, and learning to do that in a way that means something other than survival for those of us given water wings and swimming lessons from birth, requires us to think deeply about what we are worshiping, about which aspects of the divine we've been calling into the world, about who we've been becoming, and then maybe make a new choice. I wonder a lot about what the ruins of this society might look like to a future archaeologist, which things they might decide be worshipped based on the physical evidence left behind. Across the country and around the world, many of our biggest and most elaborate spaces are dedicated to commerce. The remains of the New York Stock Exchange might look to future historians like a place where people came together to worship and hopefully be blessed by their God, the market. Malls, Amazon warehouses, billboards, and all manner of other shopping-oriented spaces also might look like places of worship. Signs and stores of where items of pseudo-magical importance could be purchased by devotees hoping to gain favor by making an offering to the god called capitalism. But what has worship of money, markets, possessions, and capitalism brought us? A hierarchy-obsessed world where we make and burn through things like if resources were endless and trash actually disappears when we stop seeing it. It's resulted in every young marginalized person I know passing around the same $20, hoping to keep each other fed until tomorrow, while 540 Americans sit on top of more money than they could spend in a lifetime. Some of them so much money they couldn't even spend it in several lifetimes. It's led us to people refusing to go to the hospital even now because they would never get out from under those medical bills. It's led us to a federal government more concerned about the economic impact this pandemic has on already wealthy people than about the actual impact of over 50,000 dead Americans. This is all pretty heavy and a lot of it not news to you. So let's take a moment to step away from what's falling apart into dreaming about what we might arrive at. It's important to take moments amidst all of this change, amidst all of these waves, all of this crashing of grief and politics and the world into our lives, to center, to breathe. To dream. Centering and dreaming are necessary to survival in more ways than one. If you are caught underwater, pulled in by a tide you didn't expect or simply one you couldn't avoid, the first thing to do is resist your urge to panic. Now, in our situation, being not literally underwater most of the time, we can actually let ourselves have some time to panic if we need it. But right now, let's take a moment to breathe. I invite you in this moment to position your body in a way that helps you feel grounded. Maybe that's with your feet on the floor and your butt in the chair. Maybe it's standing. Maybe it's with your legs crossed or with a hand over your heart. You're in your own space. Get comfortable. Whatever comfortable looks like for you, find a position and take a moment to breathe. From this centered place, I invite you to begin to dream. It is 2620, 600 years from now. You are a starship's archaeologist, and your team is returning to Earth to learn more about the early 21st century. You've been tasked with excavating a long-forgotten portion of the old United States of America. It is expected that in this place you will find items suggesting the priorities of the humans of the early 21st century. You're searching books and billboards, letters, statues, buildings, records, anything really that tells the tale about how people in this one part of the world handled unprecedented challenges and ultimately paved the way for the mostly peaceful space exploring life that you, the eventual descendants of those long ago humans called Americans, now live. Your search takes you to a warm and beautiful spot up on a mountain a few miles outside the still bustling region of New San Angeles. You've read that there was a camp there where people of faith, then called Unitarian Universalists, would gather. These people are known to have played key roles in providing material support during the tumultuous years of the 2020s, and to have in their thinking laid some of the groundwork for the society in which you now live. A society where each person is provided with the resources and opportunities, material, emotional, and spiritual, that are necessary to grow and be loved into their own best selves. Breathe in that still, crisp mountain air. On the ground, you see the corner of a mostly buried object. Pick it up. See what it is. Dream about how it might have come to be. Is it a youth camp covenant that leads the way into a deeper practice of right relationship? A letter written between friends or lovers who were separated? Maybe it's a chalice inspired with words of hope and possibility. Whatever it is, take a moment to hold it in your hands and consider how the actions taken in any given moment can change the course of history. Dear ones, we will never get up on a surfboard or fluff up our feathers right in order to ride these waves if we don't spend some time envisioning how we're going to get there and dreaming about what it will be like when all of us can weather the vicissitudes of life together in beloved community. We cannot ride the waves if we never learn to dream. We cannot change the course if we never figure out how to act on our dreams. We pull the divine into our world in our repeated words and actions. So let us speak and act in the direction of care, of compassion, of a circle drawn wide and centered around what have traditionally been the margins. Let us leave artifacts that suggest we worship something worthwhile. Let us tend to what we as individuals and as a society have become and find new ways to become people fully, wonderfully, and fearfully made in the image of love.
Amen.